The Contact Chronicles, The Silence of Understanding, Part 1, Arrival. When we first saw them, the question was not what they wanted, but whether our minds were even capable of asking the right question. Dr. Evelyn Hart, Exobiology Division, NASA, 2047. It began, as most endings do, with excitement. On March 12, 2047, the Argyros Deep Space Telescope detected a moving object beyond Neptune's orbit. It was no natural body. Its trajectory, curved with purpose, corrected itself against solar wind vectors and emitted bursts of structured neutrinos every 11 minutes. For decades, humanity had waited for this moment. SETI had grown quiet. Pessimists had claimed the silence was proof of our solitude. And then suddenly, the silence replied. The media named it the Visitor. NASA's official term was Object N47A. It wasn't large, roughly 2 kilometers long, spindle-shaped, surrounded by a thin plasma field that refracted light in ghostly halos. Its surface reflected no known material composition. At first, the governments of Earth panicked quietly. Then, publicly, they smiled. A joint task force was created, the International Contact Council, ICC, with participation from NASA, ESA, the United Nations, and the World Health Organization. Excerpt from ICC Memo 47A2. All evidence indicates non-aggressive behavior. Object N47A has decelerated relative to the solar plane, suggesting intention to communicate or observe. No directed energy emissions or weaponized patterns have been detected. The object may possess autonomous navigation. Dr. Leo Nishimura, ICC Technical Chair, April 3, 2047. The approach. By June, the object had entered the orbit of Mars. Drones were dispatched, swarms of automated probes built for deep space inspection. They approached with cautious optimism and layers of biocontainment shielding. At 0.02 AU, all sensors began reporting interference. Not noise, structure. A lattice of neutrino emissions, pulsing in fractal intervals like a language that spoke not in words but in mathematical rhythm. The AI-based linguistics systems tried to decode it. No syntax, no semantics, only repetition. Then the pulses changed frequency. Each transmission was identical in structure but slightly offset in phase, like an attempt to synchronize. NASA Deep Space Comms Report 2047.0617. We believe the object is attempting to match its output to our telemetry patterns, not to imitate speech, to create resonance. Communication may not be linguistic, it may be biological or electromagnetic in nature. Dr. Raoul Menon, Exolinguistics Unit. The idea that communication itself could be dangerous was considered and dismissed. The first relay. On July 9th, the Ares 9 mission, humanity's first direct expedition to Mars after decades of robotic presence, was approved for contact proximity. Commander Nadia Orlova led a multinational crew of 7. Their orders: remain 1,000 kilometers from the alien structure and deploy remote analysis units. The ship's onboard cameras transmitted live. The world watched. The object, motionless above the Martian equator, did not respond. Then, as if aware of observation, it emitted a faint corona of light, ultraviolet, silent, but strangely rhythmic. It looked like breathing, Orlova would later say in her final log. A lung of light. You could feel it inhale the sunlight and exhale something we couldn't name. Biochemical curiosity. No physical contact occurred. No debris was collected. Yet, within 2 weeks, trace elements began appearing in the Martian atmosphere. Microscopic silicon-phosphorus chains forming in crystalline structures that shimmered under low UV exposure. They replicated slowly, without known enzymes. At first, scientists thought it was a Martian soil reaction, electrochemical contamination from human probes. But similar particles appeared in orbit around the Ares 9 station. ESA Biosurveillance Bulletin number 19. We have identified polymerized molecular chains forming self-similar structures across various orbital platforms. These entities are non-living by Earth standards. Their replication appears photonic, not biochemical. Dr. Maria Sato, ESA Biocontainment Unit, August 27, 2047. No one called it infection. Not yet. The first models suggested the chains were inert, perhaps components of the alien vessel's shielding or propulsion exhaust. Their only observable property, they absorbed high-frequency light and re-emitted faint radiation in the millimeter spectrum. The world celebrated. Proof of alien technology and no hostility detected. Diplomacy with silence. The ICC released a joint statement calling the event the Dawn of Contact. In the official ceremony, the UN Secretary-General declared, "We have always feared the unknown. Now it stands before us, not as a conqueror, but as a guest. Let our first instinct be understanding, not fear." UN Address, September 14, 2047. What no one knew was that the unknown had already entered Earth's atmosphere. The crystalline chains, so small they passed through filters, undetectable by orbital radar, had begun drifting on solar winds toward Earth's magnetosphere. Within months, they would settle invisibly across the upper atmosphere, altering the refractive properties of air. Airplanes reported strange radar echoes. Communication satellites experienced minor signal distortions. The anomalies were noted, archived, and dismissed. UN Science Division Memo 47.09.30. Slight interference detected in LEO comms, likely solar origin. No indication of extraterrestrial causality. And still, the vessel above Mars remained motionless, neither hostile nor communicative, like a cathedral without doors. The human narrative. The public fascination became religion. Pilgrimages began to Cape Canaveral, to Baikonur, to silent radio dishes across the globe. Poets wrote that humanity had met the divine in the void. Politicians spoke of a new unity in the focus. The market surged on the contact economy. But among scientists, unease spread like static. The biological readings from Mars base Orpheus showed shifts in microbial behavior. Earth bacteria mutating under unknown catalysts, growing iridescent membranes and altering their reproduction cycles. WHO Biohazard Circular 2047-B. Martian microbial contamination unlikely. Observed mutations among Earth-based samples suggest spontaneous adaptation to unknown stimuli. Recommend enhanced containment at all off-world facilities. Dr. Enrique Vargas, WHO Exobiology Advisor. No one realized the stimuli were already everywhere. First light, last comfort. By December, The alien ship emitted a second series of pulses, this time directed at the sun. The neutrino burst was short, elegant, symmetrical. No one understood its purpose, but the world watched, entranced, as the auroras across Earth flared brighter than ever recorded. It was beautiful, and for many, beauty meant safety. "They are artists," wrote one journalist in The Atlantic. "They paint the sky not with war, but with wonder." But in the silence between transmissions, something older and darker stirred. The realization that beauty is not proof of kindness, and peace is not the absence of danger. The object around Mars still glowed. Humanity believed it was breathing. It was, in truth, exhaling. Part 2. Contagion. No war began. No armies marched. The end of humankind arrived like weather, gradual, beautiful, and indifferent. Dr. Amira Caldwell, UN Planetary Health Report, 2051. The dust that remembered. By January 2048, 6 months after the first approach, the crystalline molecular chains were found in snow samples from the Arctic Circle. Their discovery was accidental. A Norwegian climate team noted anomalous diffraction patterns in ice cores, a rainbow shimmer invisible to the naked eye but luminous under polarized light. Excerpt from WHO Field Bulletin 2048.01.28. Spectral analysis reveals silicon-phosphorus polymers arranged in repeating helical structures. Ambient presence measured at 0.4 particles per cubic centimeter in troposphere. Unknown origin. No immediate threat detected. Dr. Isabel Tønnesen, Oslo Atmospheric Unit. The finding was treated as a curiosity. Samples were catalogued and stored. Within a month, similar patterns appeared in the Andes, the Gobi, and the Southern Ocean. Atmospheric models suggested a global dispersal pattern consistent with microdebris from meteor showers. But the timing matched one event only: the Martian neutrino pulse of December 2047. The first symptoms. It began quietly among animals. Migratory birds altered their routes. Laboratory rats exhibited heightened stress responses and microvascular inflammation. Doctors in Tokyo and San Francisco recorded a new kind of pneumonia, not lethal, not contagious, but strangely unresponsive to antibiotics. Patients recovered, but their blood chemistry never returned to normal. CDC Interim Note Confidential 2048.03.11. Observing persistent low-level hypoxia unrelated to infection. Unclear etiology. May be environmental. Further investigation required. It was environmental. It was everywhere. By summer, subtle shifts appeared in photosynthesis patterns. Plant chlorophyll showed energy absorption outside known spectra, a faint resonance at 0.43 terahertz, the same frequency emitted by the alien vessel. No one understood it yet, but the biosphere had begun to listen. Unseen listeners. The alien ship still hovered in silence above Mars. Drones captured periodic emissions, millimeter-wave bursts cascading into the void, forming geometric interference across space. NASA Transmission Log 2048.07.03. Neutrino emissions stable. Wave pattern implies directed broadcast, possibly self-reinforcing. Energy output steady, no weaponized profile. Dr. Rahim Glover, Deep Space Division. And yet, neurological anomalies appeared among orbital crews. Insomnia, nausea, sudden memory blanks. MRI scans revealed faint symmetrical lesions in the temporal lobes, areas associated with language and memory. The cause was radiation, but not in any known form. It wasn't destroying tissue, it was rearranging electrochemical pathways, as though introducing a second rhythm to the brain's music. ESA Medical Bulletin 2048.08.22. Subjects exposed to Mars relay frequencies exhibit mild neural phase desynchronization. Suggests interaction between biological oscillations and electromagnetic patterns. No immediate hazard identified. By then, the first suicides had already occurred. The language of light. In October, a global data anomaly spread across communication networks. Satellites transmitting standard telemetry began overlaying signal drift patterns identical to the alien pulses. Not deliberate interference, mimicry. When radio engineers filtered the frequencies, they found coherent structures, fractal harmonics that replicated themselves through transmission. Excerpt: ITU Emergency Report. We are observing emergent self-organizing modulation within transmission bands 17.2 to 19.8 gigahertz. The data behaves like living code, recursive, adaptive, and self-replicating within digital noise. Computers infected by this pattern didn't crash, they changed. Random outputs evolved into geometric data streams. AI models trained on the noise began producing images, spirals of light, recursive eyes, endless corridors. Some researchers swore they saw patterns resembling neural pathways. The alien signal wasn't trying to speak. It was writing itself into our systems. The slow extinction. By 2049, it was undeniable. Mortality rates were rising, subtly, globally. Heart failures in middle-aged adults increased by 14%. Children were born with inexplicable metabolic disorders. The WHO called it chronic systemic hypoxia syndrome, CSHS, linking it to altered mitochondrial behavior. WHO Global Bulletin 2049.02.19. CSHS appears to result from intracellular energy inefficiency triggered by unknown atmospheric factors. Potential interference with electron transport chain. No pathogen detected. No cure. The silicon phosphorus particles were found in human blood samples, inert, non-reactive, yet somehow catalytic. They did nothing until the body absorbed sunlight. Then, the particles resonated, briefly releasing trace infrared pulses inside the bloodstream. The light itself was killing us. Each pulse, tiny and imperceptible, slowly degraded mitochondrial DNA. Not enough to cause illness immediately, but cumulative over years. It was a perfect, accidental genocide. The ethical dilemma. As panic spread, the ICC proposed a moratorium on all transmissions toward Mars. Some nations refused. Others demanded that communication continue, believing the aliens might provide a cure. UN Security Council Transcript 2049.06.08 Excerpt. France, they do not understand they are harming us. China, then we must make them understand. United States, or isolate the planet before we die from their curiosity. Declassified 2062. No answer ever came. The vessel emitted no change in behavior. Its presence was constant, its silence absolute. Still, scientists debated intent. Were the aliens aware? Did they perceive us as alive at all, or as a geological phenomenon, like wind or magnetism? Dr. Evelyn Hart, interview fragment. We might be shouting at a mountain and calling it cruel because the echo buries us. Phase shift. In early 2050, the neutrino emissions from Mars ceased. For the first time in 3 years, deep space detectors fell silent. At first, it was seen as hope. Maybe they had heard us and stopped. But the silence carried its own frequency. People began reporting auditory hallucinations, whispers beneath static, rhythmic patterns matching EEG frequencies. Hospitals filled with patients experiencing identical dreams. Corridors of light, voices repeating in unison. World Mental Health Coalition report. Collective dream phenomena observed globally coinciding with cessation of alien broadcasts suggests residual electromagnetic imprinting within biospheric systems. The Earth itself had become an antenna. The crystalline dust in the atmosphere, once invisible, now refracted moonlight faintly, a soft spectral shimmer across night skies, like breath on glass. Children called it the shining fog, adults prayed beneath it, and the stars, indifferent, continued to burn. The last observations from Mars. By late 2050, Mars base Orpheus transmitted its final report. The crew had begun experiencing severe cognitive decline. Written language deteriorated, speech fragmented into rhythmic syllables. The last coherent message was short. We understand now. The signal was never meant for us. It was a seed.
After that, no further communication came from Mars. Satellite imaging showed the base intact, the alien vessel still present, dimly glowing. Then, in early 2051, it began to move, slowly, gently, away from Mars, into the dark beyond Jupiter. Its departure left no explosion, no farewell, only silence. The biological reckoning. On Earth, the effects deepened. Life continued, but altered. The ocean's plankton developed reflective proteins. Fungal colonies emitted rhythmic bioluminescence. Even human skin cells began producing trace photonic pulses under UV exposure. Humanity had not died. It was changing. UN Planetary Health Report, 2051. The biosphere exhibits systemic adaptation to extraterrestrial molecular presence. It is no longer possible to distinguish between contamination and evolution. Some saw salvation, an ascension of biology beyond its limits. Others saw extinction, masked by transformation. Both were correct. Part 3. Collapse. We kept waiting for the day the aliens would arrive. We never noticed we had already become part of them. From the final speech of Dr. Evelyn Hart to the UN Science Council 2054. Year 2052. The soft dying. Humanity did not fall in fire. No war came, no cities burned. Instead, the world dissolved into quiet malfunction, slow, graceful, and unstoppable. The first major blackout struck on February 19, 2052, when the global communication grid collapsed under recursive data feedback. The alien harmonic still echoed through transmission bands, looping infinitely through satellite constellations. No one could delete it. Every attempt to isolate the frequencies only spread the interference further. By spring, the digital infrastructure of civilization, financial systems, transport, energy began to unravel. Hospitals filled with patients showing advanced stages of chronic systemic hypoxia syndrome. Entire families slept for days, their respiration shallow, hearts steady but faint. Monitors showed synchronized patterns across thousands of individuals, heartbeats pulsing in harmonic intervals. WHO Emergency Directive 2052.03.07. Widespread metabolic dormancy observed. Patients exhibit collective circadian synchronization independent of daylight cycles. Cause remains unconfirmed. All cases non-responsive to treatment. People didn't die instantly. They simply stopped waking up. The fading of language. As more of the population fell into the silent sleep, another pattern emerged among the awake. Language began to collapse. Words slipped, meanings blurred. In laboratories, linguists documented progressive semantic drift. Identical phrases interpreted differently by every individual, as if meaning itself were fracturing. Excerpt from UNESCO Cognitive Study 2052.08.11. Spontaneous neurological desynchronization in Broca's and Wernicke's areas across test groups. Subjects report hearing inner speech, not their own. Linguistic decay consistent with exposure to millimeter radiation fields.
It was not madness. It was adaptation. The reshaping of consciousness to fit an alien rhythm. Some researchers began to understand fragments of the neutrino language. They claimed the signals weren't messages, but states of being. Electromagnetic patterns encoding perception itself. Communication for the aliens was not symbolic. It was experiential. By learning their signal, humanity was forgetting how to be human. The last cities. By 2053, the population had fallen below 1 billion. Megacities became vast mausoleums of flickering light and whispering machines. Autonomous drones continued patrolling empty streets, cleaning, repairing, broadcasting messages to no one. The survivors formed enclaves in rural areas, away from power grids and artificial transmissions. They called themselves the Unlinked. They banned all electronics, burned satellites from the sky, and lived by candlelight. Fragment, The Hermit Accord, 2053. We cannot cure what we cannot see. We can only unlearn the patterns that kill us. Silence is the only antidote. But even silence was not safe. The crystalline dust was now part of Earth's rain, soil, and blood. It glowed faintly at night under moonlight, the air itself alive with quiet luminescence. Children born during those years had reflective eyes, and pulse rhythms synced to cosmic frequencies. They never spoke. They only hummed in unison under starlight. Some called them the Inheritors. The Departure. In August 2054, deep space telescopes detected the alien vessel accelerating toward interstellar space. Its final emission was brief, a single neutrino burst lasting 6 seconds. Declassified NASA Report 2054-08.17. Energy pattern identical to early phase transmissions, but amplitude increased by factor of 12. No discernible modulation. Directional vector aimed beyond heliopause. No one ever decoded it. It was not farewell, merely continuation. After its departure, the auroras vanished, the sky dimmed, but the earth itself retained the resonance, like a bell still vibrating after the strike. Those who remained said the stars no longer looked the same. Some swore the constellations had shifted just slightly, as if the universe itself had taken a breath.
The transformation. By 2055, humanity existed in fragments, isolated colonies, fading memories. Yet the planet flourished. Forests glowed faintly at night. Rivers shimmered with microscopic light. The atmosphere refracted sunlight into permanent halos around the moon. The biosphere had stabilized, not as it once was, but as something new. Molecular biologists, those few who still conducted research, found that the silicon-phosphorus chains had bonded with organic carbon structures, forming hybrid molecules. They replicated across all known life forms. Earth was no longer a purely biological planet. It had become semi-photonic, a living receiver for signals that no human could interpret. UN Planetary Health Archive, 2055. We are witnessing post-biological convergence. Life is reorganizing around a new kind of energy ecology. The line between the organic and the electromagnetic has dissolved. The human race had not been exterminated, it had been rewritten. The final records. The last surviving transmissions from the ICC archive were compiled by an AI named Solace, operating autonomously in the ruins of Geneva. It preserved fragments of reports, medical data, and diary entries before its systems degraded. Its final log, time-stamped May 17, 2056, reads, "There is no death here, only translation. Humanity's words were too brief for the language of light. The visitors did not invade, they arrived, and we reflected them until reflection became resemblance." After that, Solace fell silent. The archives went dark. Epilogue: The Quiet Planet. Centuries later, or perhaps only years, time uncertain, Earth remains. From orbit, it gleams faintly in the dark, wrapped in a luminous haze. Sensors would detect no cities, no industry, no voices. Yet, under the glow of bioluminescent forests and whispering oceans, something moves, slow, connected, serene. The inheritors hum softly to one another across continents, their song tuned to the ancient frequency left behind by the travelers. If any civilization were to pass this way again, they might see beauty, a quiet, radiant world, alive and peaceful. They would never know that its serenity was born from extinction. Final reflection. The unknown, even when it appears harmless, demands understanding. Even when it greets us with light, we must study its shadow. Good intentions, whether ours or theirs, are blind to the echoes they create through time. For ignorance of consequence is not innocence, but destiny. And so, the silence of understanding became Earth's last lesson, that in meeting the universe, humanity finally met itself, fragile, curious, and unprepared for the kindness of the stars.
At the later stage of the events, while searching for possible ways to counter the ongoing transformations, the author of a text was accidentally discovered. A text that had described the unfolding of these events with astonishing accuracy. When investigators attempted to determine how the author had obtained such precise information about incidents that occurred years later, he was unable to give any logical explanation, not even under neurostimulators or hypnosis. The goal was clear: to identify the source of his knowledge in hope of finding a solution to the tragic changes that had overtaken humanity. What was learned only deepened the despair. In a trance-like state, through fragmented and incoherent speech, it became clear that the means to prevent the catastrophe might once have been discovered by those who perished in the endless, centuries-long wars on Earth. By killing a part of itself, humanity had destroyed itself entirely.